Welcome to Lumenaries, the podcast, where we shed light on the stories of remarkable individuals shaping our world. I'm Christopher Bolton, your host on this journey through the realms of creativity and achievement. Today, we're thrilled to host Roland Greil, a luminary in lighting and production design. Roland has shaped unforgettable experiences for audiences worldwide, collaborating with artists like Adele and the Rolling Stones. His work on tours such as Rammstein and Genesis showcases boundless creativity and technical mastery. Roland's influence extends beyond concerts to television, corporate events, and theatre productions. He's not just a designer, Roland is also a respected lecturer and author of a book called Show Lighting. Join us as we uncover the brilliance and innovation of Roland Greil, a driving force in live entertainment. This is Lumenaries, the podcast, where the spotlight is on learning. Roland, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy that you made some time out of your crazy schedule. Just for our listeners, wouldn't you mind sharing a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this crazy game?
All right. I'm trying to cut a long story short here. Now, I've been in the entertainment industry or lighting industry now for literally nearly 28 years. Basically, mostly anything kind of live entertainment related in any shape or form, and mostly on the lighting side of things. So, on the good side of things. So, lighting design. Historically, I've done programming, I've done tech work back in the days. I've worked my way up through the ranks to a certain degree. Nowadays, it's more or less purely design work, mostly lighting, a bit of video design, and I would say high level production design. But I'm not a production designer. I would never name myself one. It's like literally high level ideas. I've got crazy ideas, but to make them look good in terms of a set or in terms of a production design, there are way more talented people out there than myself. How did I get into this whole craziness? Truly, it would be a long story, but again, I'm trying to cutting it short. It's interesting one because literally you've got to go way, way back into my childhood in the 80s actually. And I think around about the age of 7 or 8, my good old man, my dad took me to a small country and western concert around Munich, even though it sounds crazy, a country and western concert in Munich in Bavaria.
I can
But we
imagine.
have
I can imagine.
but we have a few of those, and he took me there, and for whatever reason, I can't really tell you the reason, young little Roland was so impressed by the sound engineer actually and his mixing board. And on that night or within this next few days, I've made the decision for myself. I want to be a sound engineer when I'm grown up, and I abandoned all the plans of getting a firefighter or an astronaut or a race car driver, all that stuff you dream of when you're that age normally. And yeah, then fast forward a few years, whatever, at the age of 11 or 12, I started to build my little own kind of lighting systems and build speakers and started to rent them out to small parties around in my area.
Awesome.
Grew from there, started to work as a stagehand, never got paid for it, but nevertheless, I felt like the king of the world, putting up 12,000 folding chairs for a rock show in Munich. Uh,
Brilliant.
and finished school and got professional, started to rig lights. At some point, I found out that sound possibly is not as much my cup of tea as the more kind of creative visual side is. And I moved into lighting or the visual side of things. And then literally over the next nearly 3 decades or 2.5 decades, say I worked my way up to a certain degree. I was lucky enough to be at the right places at the right time, and possibly was always good in pretending to a certain degree that I'm capable of what I'm doing. In our day and age, I'm still kind of blessed to work within our industry. It is still a passion. It's something where you earn money with, yeah, but the money is literally a side effect, a good side effect without any doubt. Our capitalist world is fueled by money, but beside of that, it's a side effect, and I'm still don't call it work. And I mean, even though there are obviously, as as with everything you do in life, there are days when you do it for longer, which are possibly not as cool as the others. But bottom line, out of whatever 250 days work in a year, either in the office or abroad, more or less 248 are still cool and very enjoyable. And
Yeah, that's
I'm living
amazing.
still my passion of building big Lego sets with lighting.
Exactly.
So
Fantastic.
That was, in a nutshell, who I am and what I do and where I came from.
Did you do any formal training or did you just work your way up like most of us did in this game?
No formal training at all. I mean, literally, when I started to work in the professional part of the industry, I would say there was nothing around, literally in Germany or let alone in Europe, where you can take on any formal education which would have made sense. In Germany now, for the last whatever 20 years, we've got this kind of official job title and apprenticeship and formal training as an event technician, they call it. It would be possibly the best translation. But it was absolutely in its infancy when I started in the industry. It's like literally there was the first kind of tries, and it was not worth doing it. If you look at a more kind of an academical education, if you look at whatever universities and so on and so forth, within Germany, there was literally two options, but they were purely designed for theater.
Theater lighting or theater sound or props or
Exactly,
makeup or
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. In the aftermath, possibly that would have made sense because in our day and age, I'm a strong believer that theater is basically the breeding ground or the basement for everything what you do in our industry, and it is a good
100%.
basement. But at that age, I didn't agree on this more or less. I didn't think about. I was not really interested in theater at the age of 19. So I went the old school way. Literally, started to work for companies, rig lights, pull cables,
That's
tour
it.
around the world, build right lighting rigs, and
Pushing fly
then
cases
moved on. And
around.
exactly, absolutely, and did whatever was out there. But thanks God, I was always kind of very, at least when I was younger, very interested in kind of widening their own horizon and widening their own scope, and therefore I always jumped into the rabbit hole more or less and closed the lid above it, either with a lighting console or whatever it was. And I was lucky enough that I met people who gave me the chance to do so, and started to move more and more from a purely technical side into more a programming side, the programming side of things. And from there on, if you obviously if you want to go that way, the normal way or kind of progression is to move from programming into more the creative side of things. Not saying that I wouldn't call it a step on a career ladder because it's just different. It's just it works together, but it's different because if you're happy with programming and if this is your cup of tea and you're really good at it, that could be this is exactly as important as a designer as every technician on a show. It's like literally.
And everyone has their important part to play. And I think where we're lucky is sometimes we're lucky enough to cross over in all of those. And I think that's what makes us successful designers is when we've worked as early onset technicians, offloading the trucks, loading the trucks, patching the cables. We understand by the time we get to designing a gig what it takes to do all of that stuff.
100%, 100%. I wouldn't want to miss any part of what I've done in my life. And there have been, without any doubt, enough failures or wrong decisions and things I shouldn't have done. But ultimately, I'm kind of normally I believe in everything what I see, but I'm also a strong believer in this kind of wording of everything happens for a reason. And every little step I took throughout my career and every little mistake I've done through my career or every little kind of pothole I fell into because of either stupidity or anything else brought me to where I am today. And without any of those steps, I wouldn't be where I am today.
100%. So I suppose what you've just said kind of ties into the next question, which my question was going to be, to what do you owe your initial success? And I suppose that's just purely always being eager, always pushing the extra limit, always asking the right questions.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely. I think it's always success is a combination of multiple factors, I think. And one factor is the possibly the one which you can't really kind of decide or can't really push by yourself. That's luck, obviously. But all the other ingredients is like really kind of be passionate about what I've been passionate, what I've done. I was always very keen to learn things. I was always keen to jump into new things. So best example is like literally, I think that I don't want to sound arrogant here, but I was one of the very first on this planet who played around with media servers at the end of the 90s, and the implementation of video into the lighting world, or kind of merging both worlds together. But things like that always.
Was that with Catalysts?
That was even before Catalyst. The first kind of tries we did was with Archaeos back in the day, and a similar thing that was not literally not integrating into lighting at first, because we put this MIDI keyboards next to our console and a triggered video as well. Then we sent MIDI console MIDI commands out of lighting boards to trigger that. And then it went into fast forward with Samsk, which was pretty much Richard Bleasdale's prior version to Catalyst, and then Catalyst, and so on and so forth. No, but back to the original questions, like literally it was all about literally also going the extra mile. I mean, I never said no to a gig which was not really well paid, or as long as I saw an opportunity.
Oh, you and me both, mates.
As long as absolutely.
We always just go for it. Hey,
Yeah.
how much you got? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm in.
As long as I saw an opportunity for myself to either learn something or progress or possibly meet the right people, I did it. And then Lady Luck was with me. I was at certain stages of my career. I was at the right place at the right time, and I met the right people who gave me chances, and who let me do things, and from whom I've learned a lot, but also just opened up doors. And I mean, talking South Africa, for instance, is like South Africa is to a certain degree similar to Germany, because Germany, beside of the automotive industry, within our industry, is a very closed market. So you've got Germany, Switzerland, Austria, especially if you look at live entertainment, it's Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and to break through these borders, or this virtual kind of limitations of being just in this one market, you need people who give you chances, and you need to be proactive, and you need to push things. And I was lucky enough that I met people down the road, like whatever, Patrick or Adam and others.
We're definitely going to get into that a little bit later. I have some questions for you around that in particular. But first of all, if you don't mind, I'm going to pause you then. I'm going to say, when we first met in South Africa, I think it was around 2012. I think Duncan brought you over. You were
somewhere around
you
about.
were on a tour talking about. That was even before you came over with your lady. It was just yourself, I think. And you were at the time.
Yeah.
You had just finished touring with Adele, or you were in the process of touring, or you had some dates left over.
I think it was right prior to it. It's like before we head out with Adele.
Yeah. And in doing the research, I mean, you and I have been mates since. In the process of researching this podcast with you, I realized that you also done a Eurovision, and I never knew about that. Spill the beans, buddy. How did you get to Eurovision?
Yep. I mean, back in the day when I did my one Eurovision, actually, I was doing quite a bit of work with a German designer, Jerry Appelt, various bits and pieces, a lot of work in
Okay.
funny enough, in Russia, doing lighting the Red Square and crazy things. And when we were collaborating quite a bit, and it was his second Eurovision as a lead designer. He did the one in Germany, and I think it was 2011, and the one I did was in Azerbaijan, in Baku, in 2012, on the media server side of things.
So 2012.
Working for Jerry, actually, back in the day. And it was an interesting experience, and it was a good experience. It was one of
Awesome.
one of the things possibly some people think they need to tick off their bucket list, but I never saw it that way. It's good, absolutely. It was like I did a Eurovision in 2012, which is now 12 years ago. It's crazy. Time flies.
It's crazy. I had a long conversation with Ulla the other night. He was two episodes ago, so episode 4 will be Ulla, and him and I were having a talk about all the stuff Eurovision, and he was also talking about media servers and all that kind of stuff. It was very fascinating. That's why when I did the research for this and I found that out, I thought I got to bring that up with you. That's very interesting. So,
yeah, I mean, there is one more of the thing that I was lucky enough in my career. Basically, obviously, historically, I started pretty much in touring. This is always what I kind of pursued to a certain degree because I love music and I was fascinated by touring in any shape or form. So historically, I came from this live entertainment side of things, but down the road throughout my years in the industry, I was lucky enough to venture out in all different areas of our industry. So, beside of being a live entertainment or a rock and roll guy, I've done broadcast work to possibly the biggest level like Eurovision and so on and so on. Fourth, I've done theater work. I've done a bit of corporate work. That's possibly one of the very few areas within our industry which never really was my cup of tea. I could do it, not a doubt. But anyways, I've done all those various.
Nodded out. Fair enough.
Uh, uh,
The hardest thing about doing corporate is staying awake,
Pretty
mate. That's
much.
the most difficult.
Absolutely. No, but I think bottom line is like literally, I was lucky enough to do all those different things. And there's, I think also a big, to a certain degree, a big part or ingredient of my success over the years. Because every area in our industry does things slightly differently. Obviously, we all cook with the same water. We've all got the same tool set, but how we kind of make use of that tool set and how we cook our meal is slightly different. And I'm not saying either one of them is right or wrong because they are not right or wrong. But you can take some things which you would never do in rock and roll, for instance, from broadcast or from TV shows into rock and roll and vice versa. And again, it brings you back to what we already said is like if you learn the mechanics and the physics of theater and drama within theater and the narrative within theater, it will propel you because it could. That is, and I hate to criticize. I don't want to criticize anybody's work because whoever gets paid to design a show or put together a show or program a show, somebody must like his work. But what I'm lacking in nearly whatever 60-70% of shows I see is a real drama or a narrative in there, a visual narrative. And that is something you learn if you really dive deep into theater.
When I first met you, you had just finished Adele. Since then, you've done the Rolling Stones, Genesis, Fort Collins, Rammstein. Your collaborations are like a list of the biggest influences in music history. My God, man. All in like 12 years. What's next for you? What are your next 12 years going to look like?
Hopefully, it will be filled with good projects with good people. That's bottom line. And I mean, there's exciting. It's exciting times in another shape or form. It's like at a certain point of my career, I kind of moved away because in the first 20 years, you always strive to do bigger names, to do bigger shows, to do all the crazy shit. But at some point, you realize more and more it's all about working with ego-free, good people. Because that is any part of your work is also a part of your lifetime, and you don't want to spend it fighting politics, kind of doing all that bullshit. And also, ultimately, if you work within a group or a team of really good people who are lovely and have got no ego issues, they don't want to be rock stars, the result will be way better. So that changed a little bit, and that brought me also to this new venture and a new baby because there've been a group I've been working on and off over the last years or even decades of really good people, and we worked on whatever different shows together, and therefore we now have found this new kind of venture, which is the 360 Degree Collective, which is also it is changing our kind of the landscape of I think our industry is changing in terms of the clients, and that doesn't matter if it's within live entertainment or corporate or broadcast. Modern day managements, producers, and so on and forth, they are getting way more efficient, and they don't want to really deal with many entities anymore because historically you always put a team together. Doesn't matter how big your team was or how big your show was. You hired a production manager, you hired a lighting guy, you hired an audio guy, blah blah blah, and kind of piecemeal this team together. But they don't want to worry about that anymore. And out of the necessity, we formed this collective of people to move on into offering more holistic work. So that's the next.
So would you say the collective is a agency
No,
that somebody would contact if they wanted to have a bespoke show done?
I wouldn't call it an agency because an agent is in any industry. An agent is just somebody who sells some souls, and he sells the soul as much as he can for as much money as he can. That's in music.
Is the 360 Collective a solution for a client to phone? Are you guys actively looking for work, or is it a
Yeah,
matter of okay, okay,
absolutely.
that sounds cool.
It is as like we got a basically it's a vehicle, or the underlying is a vehicle, which is a company basically, and that is what counts to the client. The client counts calls 360-degree collective to produce, create, build a show for him, whatever it is. Within the group of people we have on board, I wouldn't be afraid to do anything anywhere in the world of any shape or form.
Absolutely, you've got some of the best brains in the business collective there. That's for sure.
Yeah, and they call us, and the beauty of the collective then is like literally we're not handcuffed to whatever 20 employees or 30 or 50 employees. We are open, and then you build an, let's call it a task force, a team who tackles that specific project of the client. That's the idea behind it, and the beauty of it is like this brings me back to your original question. It is a group of friends, first of all. Is they all know what they're doing without any doubt, and some of them have, or most of them have got very impressive kind of back catalogs of work within their area of expertise. But foremost, it's a group of friends who all share the same work ethos of working without any ego, no bullshitting, having a good time together to create the best possible result ultimately. And this is a little bit where I see my future. Is like literally two things. Is first of all to do keep on doing cool work, and it's like if I'm saying cool work, it's not all about the big names. I mean, you need the big names; they open doors, and I was really blessed to have worked for some of the biggest within the music industry and also outside the music industry. And still do so. I mean, we're just in the process of heading out with the Stones again in April in America.
Well, this leads very nicely into my next question. We will get back to the Stones, of course, because I do have some questions further down. But so I know you're a masterful designer, programmer of music, and I know that's where your passion sits. But I know you recently designed and lit the opening ceremony of the Asia Cup. Now, I know this is not your usual formats. How did you find designing something like that for one night only? Did you feel the pressure being different, knowing you only had one shot, or did you embrace the experience?
I 100% embraced it, and I mean it's not so much different because if you put together a rock show, whatever it is, Rammstein, Stones, whatever it is, ultimately your first show should be perfect. So obviously you got a few more shots at it if you fuck it up, without any doubt. But
For sure.
ultimately, what you strive for is this first show. What you work towards the opening night, and it has to be great on opening night. The same applies obviously for such a ceremony project, major event project I've just recently done in Qatar. I mean, that project by itself had its own kind of physics and challenges, which were great. And if it would be easy, everybody could do it. But again, it was not all. If you look at it from a certain perspective, it's not so much different. It has got its own kind of laws or physics to it. Just purely if you look at the design side, if you're lighting a stadium ceremony project, the first hurdle you need to overcome is lighting positions, and that's a big one because whatever stage and design you put in for a rock show into a stadium, you have any kind of structure either at the end of a stadium or sometimes in the middle of a stadium where you can attach lighting and can achieve a lot within that thing. And also the let's call it the stage or the field of play on a concert, for instance, is very limited. While looking at such a ceremony project, you're dealing with nearly the whole field of play or the whole pitch of a stadium, which you need to light and which you need to make look good. And that with the limitations that there is normally no real structure in there where you can rig lights in a sensible way.
But also not blinding everybody in the audience. It's such a tricky dynamic because you can't. I know I learned this when I did my first stadium gig a few years ago when I was working with ACT, and we had a whole bunch of kids on the floor, and we were shooting it across the field of play, and it looked amazing on the people, but we were blinding everybody on the audience, and then we had to move lighting positions. Luckily, we were in a position to do it because we had enough rehearsal time. So I hear what you're saying. It is a different dynamic, where it's not a single point of focus. It's actually you have to light in the whole round, and it does change the dynamic completely.
Absolutely. But beside of that, how you approach such a show, it is a theater piece, period. Such a ceremony, even more than a rock show. But so pretty much the approaches are similar, just with the caveat that possibly the physics of some things are different. And again, I'm not saying better or worse; they're just different. Also, it is on such big scale projects. Obviously, as a designer, you move more and more into the role of a politician because you're dealing with so many stakeholders, and especially major event productions. They are like they are very sensitive in terms of because they are corporations. I mean, they set up huge teams with even an HR department and all that stuff you would have in a big company, which is not wrong at all.
And they're spending millions and millions and millions. So, like, I think when I was younger, I wouldn't have been able to deal with that pressure. I think now that we're older, more mature, I think dealing with that kind of pressure that comes from all the expectations with going and doing a ceremony like that, I think it's more appropriate when you have the skills.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like, and obviously, when you're, especially when you're whatever young, or when you're 20, or when you're hitting 30, you think you're the king of the world, and possibly on a technical side of things, I would even agree on that because it all shifts, and this is also how my role shifted. I mean, I'm not really doing any programming work anymore, not on purpose, was never intended. So it's like literally, Stones is the last gig pretty much left where I touch some buttons by myself, but it works because it's not that uber complicated. But you never think that way, and you always think also when I was young, when I was 20 or 25 or 30, I always thought, hey, I will always progress in terms of programming. And will get better in it because I'm so open-minded, blah blah blah. But first of all, your available time to jump into a rabbit hole kind of disappears more and more over the years, and also my kind of my talent in learning a lot of new technical things is not as good as anymore as it was when I was 28. Period. It's like, but therefore, on the opposite side, at the same age, you think you know it all and you know all the politics and the dynamics of it, but you don't. It's like literally, this is something which, as you just said, the years of life and the years of experience teach you. I'm not afraid to say that I failed over my career a few times, big time, because I just was not playing the cards right, and that's possibly also on a certain level. If you go up and doing bigger shows, it doesn't matter if it's as a programmer, as an associate, as a designer, especially. It is getting more and more important that you got your political shit and your diplomatic shit together. More important because your skill set should be there without any doubt. You've got to deliver, or you've got to be capable of delivering whatever you're getting hired for.
But also, I suppose for yourself, sorry to interrupt you, but for yourself, when you're at that level, it's you understand what the programmers need, so you know how long it's going to take. And if you weren't a programmer, you wouldn't know that. So I think what makes you so good at where you're at now, being able to handle a big ceremony as a politician, is the fact that you can back up the technical team to say, hey guys, like we need 2 days, or we need 3 hours, or we need 2 hours. You actually can tangibly give that information to the client, and they'll go, okay, cool. Because some people don't know that information because they've never programmed a console before, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree to mostly with you here. I think it could also be, if you look at it more from a creative standpoint, I mean, we are no artists, but from an art standpoint, it could be sometimes a blessing that you don't know how dynamics work behind it and how the technicalities work, because you would think I
Of
think
the
you would
limitations,
think in the
got you.
creations exactly you would create a little bit more freely. I think for me personally, it was a decently difficult time, and sometimes still is if you work with new programmers who are possibly not up to your expectations sometimes, or not up to your speed, or doing things differently. The biggest challenge was like literally, especially this transition phase where I did less and less programming work and moving more and more into the role of sitting not next to a friend who programmed the show for me. Was like literally because you're standing there and sitting there. It's like fuck, this is the wrong way. Do it that way. Get it done that way. It's like you're fucking it up. And I know,
Stop pushing
just
clear.
kidding. Yeah, exactly. So that was what is was interesting in this transition. Obviously, you wouldn't face that if you don't have a clue what the lighting board next to you does, or the multiple lighting board does. So it's good and bad. It's like I think 90% I agree with you, because having had the or having had being lucky enough to go through all the ranks, like literally from putting up folding chairs
Mm,
to
mm.
rigging lights, even though that was nowadays different lights, because when I started, it was still
Generics,
predominantly generics, and then
barcans.
a few scanners. But uh, I wouldn't want to miss one of those times, because you got a completely different understanding for what's going on, and also a different a kind of a different way of assessing things, what it really costs if you want to, whatever. If you're changing from a creative point, if you ask your lighting crew to put another light somewhere else, or fix something at that point of time, if you wouldn't have got this background, or technical background, call it technical background, you would possibly just go and it's like, I need this light over there on this truss in the next half an hour, and possibly it is not possible to
Yeah,
achieve that within a given time
yeah.
frame.
It's the reality around it, hey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So clearly, with all your travels, you spend an incredible amount of time on the aircraft, or in buses, or in transits and trains. How do you occupy your time in transit? I assume it's when you get a chance to sleep, or do you spend that time doing some work?
If I have to, obviously you have to work. I try to avoid it as much as possible, and at least especially air travel. I always try to use that as an sacred time, or an holy time, where literally you're out of the reach, and you can just relax a little bit to a certain degree. And it's like, again, this is like great, and a curse as well, that in our day and age, literally, at least most of the long haul flights nowadays are equipped with Wi-Fi, which is
I know.
could
What's up with
could
that?
be very yeah, could be very helpful, but doesn't necessarily is cool, because then they're now kind of your availability is kind of also on one of the last safe zones, where you stayed away from all
Exactly.
communication channels. And I've got always got this great example talking in South Africa in, well, whatever, 2015 or so. I spent on holiday with my wife, back then just girlfriend, that in South Africa, and we did this Rail, which is this
Oh,
old
wow.
school
Yes.
train
Gorgeous.
ride, and we drove we took the train from Pretoria to Cape Town, actually, which is I think a 3.5 or 4 day journey. And that train is it's beautiful. It's like richly with proper bedrooms, and very lovely fine dining, food and so on. But it's like it transports you back into the earliest 20th century of traveling, the 20th century of traveling, basically. There's no radios on this train. There's no televisions on the train. There's cell phones are prohibited, more or less, to be used on the train, and it deaccelerates traveling so much, and it changes traveling 100% in a very positive way, because this train goes with whatever 30 miles per hour, so very slowly, and you enjoy the beautiful landscape and have a tea or have a drink, and you also finally start to really kind of meet people again and communicate with people. Uh, Also take this time as a real journey, and soak in what's around you, and also gives you again this beautiful opportunity to escape big brother to a certain degree, because
Absolutely.
even without Wi-Fi on planes, what happens, or what historically happens, is like you jump on a plane, you fly whatever from here to America or to wherever in the world. The moment the wheels touch the ground of the plane, you switch on your phone again, bam, check your emails. So you're constantly kind of surrounded or involved in your work, and therefore I'm trying not to work too much while traveling, even so way too often it's not avoidable. So you end up getting your laptop out and answering mails or sketching things or doing stuff.
I must say, I used to always use the travel time to recover before I go home to the family because you know what it's like. You've been on the road for weeks on end sometimes, and then you got to go back. You got to be a dad. You got to be a husband. You got to try and get back to reality.
Absolutely.
And now that they have the Wi-Fi on the planes, it's like, oh no, now people can get a hold of me. There's no excuses.
Very true. Very true.
So if, if you don't mind, we are going to just get into a little bit of tech because, I am teaching tech. So I need to ask you a couple tech related questions. I do know you don't program much these days. Um, I know you started off an MA guy. Were you MA1 first or did you start MA2? What was your first console?
My very first console, way back, was funny enough, was either Celco Golds or Alike Commanders, and we moved on to Scan Commanders, and then as the whole world was a heavy user of flying pick consoles, Hollow 2s was the thing, and I mean, Peaky revolutionized our industry with this console because everything nowadays is still loosely based on the principles of an Hollow 2, more or less. Anyways, then I ended up being jumping right from Hawk 2 to Hawk 3, which I mean, the people
I
who
didn't know you were a hog guy in the beginning. I didn't know that.
that was way. I mean, back in the days when we used Hawk 2, Hawk 2 was the industry standard. Period. There was
Mm,
nothing. Which compared to it, there was nothing around.
yeah, sure.
MA by that time just had light commanders and the scan commander, and we did crazy shit with scan commanders, but ultimately that was a little board to control. I think it was 12 or 16 intelligent lights, and you could connect those extensions or expansions they called it, which was 19-inch stuff, where you can add another 16, but it was also a completely different kind of program. It was not tracking. It was
No, sure.
different time. The only other
I mean,
thing I touched.
I remember programming with 12 faders at the top and on
Mhm.
A, and then 12 faders on B, and then you
Yeah,
switch between A and B. I think it was I can't even remember what it was called, but if you messed it up, you would switch the lamp off.
brilliant.
And then it would take like 15 minutes for the lamp to cool down first before it would switch on again.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, and back in the day, there was literally. I mean, the only thing which was used in programming very light rigs was the Artisan, but it was a proprietary very light product, and LSD when they still had their icons. I mean, there was still LST, obviously. They had pretty much their icon board, but that was very proprietary and very just used on those kind of shows. So the ultimate the weapon and the only weapon was in Hawk 2. We had a brief encounters which was Martin's first foray, Martin Lighting's first foray in building consoles was the Martin case, which
Case,
must have
yes.
appeared somewhere late 90s, somewhere mid late 90s. Uh, but ultimately, you were a Hawk. If you operated a program, bigger rigs, there was Hawk. There was nothing else. Period. Uh, and obviously, as a Hawk guy, you moved on to. By that time, I think MA came out with the one by two, or it got kind of usable by 2002, 2003, possibly somewhere there. And that was also the time when all the debacle and the craziness happened with Hollow 3, which then got so having high went high and bought Flying Pig, and Flying Pig was not there anymore. Period. Because what Hein did to Flying Pig was anything but right. And the Hawk 3 was anything but right. So it literally never really worked as it should.
Never really took off
And
again.
yeah, and then there was at that point of time there was a working alternative, or who- which was working already on the scale, because that was also the time where the lighting rigs exponentially grew in terms of how many moving lights and intelligent lights you use within one show. Because even at the whatever the late 90s, early 2000s, big big touring productions were whatever a few hundred park cans or generics in any shape or form, and possibly whatever 30, 40 intelligent lights. But now by 2001, 2002, you started to have whatever 100 moving lights in a rig or 200 moving lights, and that was not the exception anymore. It was
It was
kind
the
of
norm.
the
Yeah.
norm, the norm. So,
Mm,
and then there was
you're
the
right.
MA1, which I didn't really, I've got to be honest here, I didn't really like from how the console worked on the software end, but it did the job. It was reliable, it was performant, and then that was kind of the switch to the MA, or the switch back to the MA side, because there was a product which worked, and from there on, it was all MA since I would say 2004, 2005 ish, and yeah.
So have you and your team switched over to MA3 yet?
Funny enough, we've just done the first bigger or kind of real shows on MA3 or MA3 mode. I mean, we used MA3 hardware now for 2, 3 years,
Yeah, sure.
but always in MA2 mode, pretty much. Qatar was the first real big show or complex show where we programmed kind of natively on MA3. Now, I said I just came off of a previous session for the last week or so, and we put together this show for this successful young artist in Germany, which goes out on tour end of April. And that was the second show where we used MA3 now in a row. And it is a little bit like back in the, beside of the technical difficulties, but from a way of thinking thing, it is very similar to back in the day from Hawk 2 to Hawk 3, because you've got to open your mind,
A
and
lot of people have said that.
you've got,
A lot of people have
yeah,
said the same. Yeah.
and you've got to open up your mind and be ready to learn a few new things. I guess again, it was not really up to me. I'm not sure if I really will dive into MA3, or time will allow me by myself to dive deep into the MA3 software. But you've got to be open-minded to learn new things, because there are things different. And as with always with everything in life, if you want to improve something in life, you've got to change it. Because if you just copy and paste what the MA2 was, you wouldn't improve it. And therefore, it was, let's call it a steep learning curve without any doubt, which came with its hurdles, with also without any doubt. There were hurdles. But bottom line, I think you've got to move on, and I think there are a lot of benefits in this console, which will make life easier down the road, or more efficient, because ultimately it
Absolutely.
all comes down.
Especially with touring.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So obviously being at the very top of your game, you still have a lot. I'm sure you're going to have a very big bright future ahead, but I need to ask you a couple opinions, shall we say. I know you very rarely have to take budget into mind. Well, budget may be in a different sense of the word. Budgets may be not necessarily on the quantity of equipment or design limitations, but maybe how long it takes to set up the equipment. So because I know in the touring world, that's what costs you the money in the end. But with being exposed to all the latest and the greatest equipment that's available in the markets, do you have a weapon of choice, piece of a kit or equipment that you rate is just unbelievable? One of those lights, like, I mean, I can think back to the original Mac 2000 when they first came out, and then eventually the Mac Viper. And is there any piece of kit that sits close to your heart?
First, I think I've got to straighten something out, because doing bigger shows or more high-profile shows doesn't mean you're not dealing with budget. You're dealing with budget on every show level you're dealing with. Possibly the budget is different, but then the expectation is different. So a lot of work, if you're signing on as a lead designer with a project, is a lot of handling expectations versus budget limitations, and that doesn't matter if you do a club tour or a small show, or if you do the biggest major event in the world. You're always dealing with budget. To answer your real question, sorry to jump in there, but to answer your real question, I wouldn't say there is anything specific, and that comes also down to my my kind of thinking about technology or equipment in general, because this is also something where you move into to a certain what you learn over the years when you start to work. It's all about technology, and it's all about the beauty of technology, and it's all about getting the newest kit and the newest whatever light and the newest whatever console or media server or LED wall and so on and so forth. So it's all about technology, and I mean we're all a bit nerds and we love technology, and it's all fair, and I still love good technology. But the more major I think you get as a creative or putting together and designing shows, the more you learn, or I at least for myself learned that it's technology is not in the at least in the first instance not is kind of not really the first thing you think about, because what you should free your mind of is technology when you design, because what you're after is to create this visual narrative, this scene, this look and feel, this atmosphere for any kind of show. So you create this, let's call it a vision, or this look in your head, what you're striving for, what you want to create. Either you came up with the look, or it is came out of a conversations with your client or a collaborative effort with other designers. Uh, and any kind of technology, it doesn't matter if it's lighting, video, whatever it is, or any specific lighting instrument or fixture, it's just a tool to realize that vision. And therefore, the tool could be anything. Sometimes this tool could be a Parcam. It could be a Mac 2000, because you don't need any super great mega light, which just came out. So I don't have any specific. Obviously, you have your normal, for certain things. You've got your go-tos because there are the things which do that job specifically good, really well. If you look whatever, if you look in a decent beam light, and for a beam light for me, for instance, beside of very few occasions, it's all about lens diameter. And for the last 2 years, the only thing which was out there was an Excalibur formulation. But would I call that my go-to fixture? For a certain look, yes. As well as another fixture is the go-to for a certain another look. And that's also again also dictated obviously by again budget and market availability, because there are there are very few shows where you're still able or capable in a position that somebody buys new kit for you. This is only the if you design a tour production which goes out for a few years, so that the rental company can make it back its money.
I got you. I got you. So I know you obviously a lot of your success is owed to personal relationships that you've built over the years with, designers, big influential people. You've partnered with some of the biggest names in lighting history. Um, I can't imagine the pressure of working with someone like Patrick Woodruff initially. It must have been quite something. Having to pinch yourself that it's real. Share some of your stories with us about the times you spent with these
Yeah,
legends.
yeah. I mean, I'm blessed and I'm humbled that I had the chance and still have the chance to work with them, or and especially in my times where I really kind of partnered up with them and literally did 80 or 90 or even 100% of my work for Patrick with the times we're there. And I don't want to miss anything of it. I mean, to start with, when you first get the chance and you start to work with somebody like that, you're a little bit overwhelmed or kind of overwhelmed. But ultimately, you quickly also find out that they're also only humans. And again, it comes down to if somebody is a really nice and a very cool human, or
Yep.
if somebody is more complicated in that. And thanks God, Patrick is the most charming and most loyal and friendly guy in the world, possibly within our industry. even
Awesome.
so, of all his with all of his success. And bottom line, I enjoyed every second with it. And I mean, out of starting to work on very small scale projects together, a long kind of collaboration, friendship grew out of it. And I mean, for a few years, as you said, I partnered up with them and worked exclusively through Woodruff Bassett Design by that time. Then, and again, it was a great stepping stone, but it was also a good time where I learned a lot. Uh, which ultimately also all the work we did together opened doors all the way down without any doubt, and I wouldn't want to miss a second of it, pretty much. And yeah, I mean, more or less, it taught me a lot. And again, possibly, obviously, a little bit on the lighting or on the design side as well, but more what I think what I owe mostly to Patrick is to learn the dynamics and the politics and how you sell yourself out in this
Yep.
market. And
Yep.
that is again second to none. So and the great thing is even so our our kind of exclusive ways and our proper full on partnership split a few years ago, we still manage to be really good friends. And I know I could call him any time with a question and vice versa. And we still, since kind of our ways split a little bit, we still do work together. I mean,
That's
in the
cool.
meantime, we did Genesis together.
Yeah, don't burn your
We
bridges,
still
eh?
done. Yeah, and absolutely not. Sometimes they burn by themselves, unfortunately, and sometimes on very few occasions, it's possibly really better to burn them. But normally, in 98% of the cases, it's never good to burn bridges. I mean, you always, in Germany, we've got this kind of saying, we always meet twice, but this is not even close to burning any bridges again with Patrick because we still work together and we still do shows together and they call and I call them, so it's all good. But ultimately, it was an interesting ride, and this is one of the things where I was lucky enough that I got this a few small opportunities, somewhat nearly 20 years ago, to show them that this young German kid
Can do it.
is capable of doing so or can do something. And then they gave me the chances, and this is where it all started, and which is without any doubt a big building block of where I am now.
Amazing. And you know what? You have been such an inspiration to not only me and so many people back in South Africa that you've gone back and you've done so many presentations. And I'm sure you've traveled all over the world. You've written some amazing books. But just before we say goodbye, because it has been such an amazing chat with you, I'd like for you to please share with our listeners if you were to give them advice coming into this industry, what would you say to you? What would you say to a young Roland?
I would say, it's an interesting one, but to start with, I would say it's like you picked the right industry if you want to have fun. But do do everything you can to kind of widen your view to get better. Don't say no to any to gigs because they are underpaid or you think they are not important. Because it's key to really hone your skills. It's and you do so by doing every step, everything. I mean, by putting up a folding chair, you learn the mechanics of what a stagehand is. By going into a small club and lighting shows with whatever 24 park hands and two blinders, you learn how to put together a show. And this is also something I would say is like literally you learn way more working with a small toolkit
Mm-hmm.
than you learn on a big rig out there. Because
Absolutely.
in theory, if you've got whatever a few hundred moving lights in your rig, you switch them on, you put a little bit of haze in the venue, put a gobo in it, it looks impressive. I'm saying impressive. I'm not saying beautiful. That's a huge difference. But what do you do with this rig to really create the magic and the beauty of a show? What you're all striving for? That is where talent is needed. And this talent and this skill set, you can build way more by trying to light a 2 hour concert or a 2 hour theatrical piece or whatever with a very, very small rig, with whatever 24 lights, or nowadays possibly even intelligent lights, let's say whatever 10 moving lights, and a few LED park cans. This is where you can hone your skills, because ultimately then transferring that skill set onto a big rig is pretty much, it's just organizational, but the approach is the same, and you're trying to achieve the same. So that in combination, and always ultimately, I think another thing, the last thing possibly to that, is to add, always be a humble, nice, gentle human being.
There we go.
Keep your 2 feet on the ground, because that will definitely guarantee you a longevity in this career.
Absolutely, my friend. You know what? You've just literally summarized everything that everybody has said in every single meeting. Okay, my friend, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Have a good one. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.